Well, folks, we draw to a close, and I've been asked by Harvey to give a few closing remarks, if I might. We opened this morning very much with the theme of innovation and transformation. And there's a joke doing the rounds that I think expresses some of the frustration we all have at the moment with the conversation about Brexit. The joke runs along the lines of a guy's driving down the M25. Suddenly, everything comes to a halt. He doesn't know what's going on. And a group of people are marching back along the vehicles, all carrying buckets. And the buckets are there, and they come up to his window, and they knock on it, and he rolls down the window. He says, "What's going on?" He says, "Well, we've decided to take things into our own hands. We're having a people's protest, and we're here out on the M25. We've shut the traffic to collect." And he keeps shaking the bucket. "Well, what are you after? Anything you can give." Shakes the bucket again. "What are most people giving?" Says, "About a gallon." So, there's a lot of frustration out there. But we've been here before. This is the 500th year of Sir Thomas Gresham's birth, the quincentenary. Gresham was born in 1519, died in 1579, and you see him all over the city of London. The Royal Exchange was his, arguably the first exchange, from whence, in fact, when they decided to ride horses into the exchange, the stock exchange broke out. And in fact, Lloyd's, contrary to its formal history, actually began in the Royal Exchange. And then they decided that they didn't want to pay the fees that the exchange charged for deals, so they settled on a coffee house halfway between the Pool of London and the Royal Exchange called Lloyd's on Tower Street. Well, the joke was on them because Lloyd himself worked out 2.5% or whatever the going rate was in those days was due to him. I run the Global Financial Centers Index, the Global Green Finance Index, and the Smart Centers Index, amongst other things. And it's very clear that London is facing challenging times. The biggest drop of any major center in our index 2 weeks ago, and actually quite a significant drop in an area we like to believe that we're doing well in green finance last week. So things are not rosy. But in Gresham's day, things weren't rosy either, and he took advantage of it. The Spanish and the Dutch decided to fight a little battle between themselves, and he poached all the business out of Antwerp. So there were opportunities there to be had also. If you'd like to learn more about him, by the way, just a little ad. The Guildhall Library is running a free exhibition till the middle of December on his life, in aid also of the first biography of Gresham in modern times. Last one was 1839, written by John Guy, the Tudor historian, who's done Mary Queen of Scots and Thomas Becket and many others. So I commend it to you. It takes about 10 or 15 minutes, but a real important man, because I would argue, as does John Guy quite cogently, it was Gresham what made it, and that's what made the City of London. Before that, it was largely a sheep market town. Just to kind of give you a flavor of that, do remember that when he decided to build the Royal Exchange, that was inside this walled city. If you were to drop a pin at the center, near his dam, and it's going to fall on the Royal Exchange, isn't it? Well, it was an empty yard, and he was able to build the construction afresh without demolishing anything. So it just shows you how poor this place was up until 1560. A summary is always tough, and I'm not going to go blow by blow, but I do want to remind you we had 9 sessions today. And you sometimes come away from a conference and you go, "I'm not sure what I got." But just go very quickly. Green finance and an excellent discussion, and I got my policy performance bonds in. We had Crypto Compare. I love that. Alyssa really showed, frankly, at least against traditional markets, the weakness of these markets, the lack of liquidity and the skewedness in them. Mark Worrell came back with EIX, looking at some opportunities. The execution to settlement team touched on smart ledgers, blockchains, if you will, and we're looking at, was this the trough of disillusion or sort of the highlands of hope? I'll leave it to you to decide where it fell. Mike St. John Green on cyber, fascinating. You probably aren't aware, but Mike St. John Green was parachuted in by GCHQ to help handle the carbon market crisis of 2011, which was a cyber thing that I worked closely with him on. I wish he'd had time to talk about the impact of quantum computing, but he made this lovely distinction, I think. We all talk about the plumbing in the city, and he reminded us that there are some drains down there. The financial centers discussion, a delight to have Graham here, but also to have our 2 guests from Luxembourg and from Frankfurt. Martin Wolf, wow, fragility of the world. I'm glad that there were no razors in the seats behind me. I'm not too sure where I fall on that. Gina Miller, of course, I don't recall ever a standing ovation at this conference, but clearly many of you impressed it. I was reminded as well, we didn't even touch on it, when I was advising the Taoiseach last year, the Irish Times ran this most beautiful cartoon making fun of Boris Bridge. You may recall the Boris Bridge from Larne to Stranraer, and the cartoon had two panels. The first panel had Boris cutting the ribbon and people leaving from Larne and arriving in Stranraer to be greeted by a bunch of Scots in kilts, waving, "Welcome to Scotland, a proud member of the EU." So we didn't even start to touch on some of the implications. And then I think it was a lovely ending with Jeremy channeling Andrew Neil on This Week and the panel. What a really good end and a very good conversation. Well, where does that leave us? Well, are we bulls or bears? This is it. And I often end at something like this. I do look to Sir Thomas Gresham. He was not a nice person, but he certainly knew how to take advantage of situations. And I think there are going to be a lot of advantages to be had from certain situations. We live in exciting times, but I'm always reminded, am I a pessimist or an optimist? And I like to respond that I'm an optimist, of course, because pessimism is for better times. So thank you for coming, and I'm looking forward to, I can only stay briefly for drinks, but I'll hand you to the capable hands of Bob, who will keep us to time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. Thank all of you for staying. I've never seen so many people still here at the end of the programme, but it's been a delight serving you today and keeping up to date with the time. Thank you, everybody, for staying on time. I'm going to ask Herbie if he's here. When is Les Ferdinand going to present this bottle of champagne? Is it
6
over the road?
Yeah,
thank you very much. Thank you. Well, that's it for today. As you know, there is now drinks. Herbie, what is the address of the place we're going to have drinks? Oh, it is. There. That's where it is. It's behind you, yeah. Thank you, pantomime for you. Thank you very much. See you all next year. And that's it. Thank you.